From the tip of coastal Northern California to the U.S.-Mexico border, the infamous San Andreas Fault runs 810 miles long. Considered one of the most active fault lines in the world, the San Andreas gained notoriety partly due to the San Francisco quake of 1906. Now, earthquakes of the past are providing new evidence that the San Andreas could work in tandem with another fault to create a disastrous seismic event in the future, one that would be particularly devastating to Southern California. Geophysics professor Julian Lozos of California State University Northridge hypothesized this scenario. He used computer models and paleoseismic data to study the 1812 quake of San Juan Capistrano. He says the 7.5 magnitude quake started along the San Jacinto Fault and then jumped to the San Andreas.
If the San Jacinto, if something that, starts as a, if it were just the San Jacinto, it would only be a 6.7 or 8. We're able to hop onto the San Andreas and become a 7.5. That's a bigger earthquake in a larger area, and so it would affect a lot more people. And so people in LA, for example, who might not be thinking so much about the San Jacinto Fault might need to think about it more now.
In fact, a quake along the San Jacinto could be even more devastating than a quake along the San Andreas, mainly because it runs through some of Southern California's most densely populated areas, including San Bernardino, Riverside, and San Diego. Lozos says he'd love to see the study get turned into a planning scenario, one that prepares people not only for what's most likely to happen, but also for the worst that could happen.
I like to use the example of Japan in 2011. So that was a 9. That was a massively gigantic earthquake. And they were ready for an 8.5. But just that biggest thing happens the least often. And so they just hadn't looked back far enough in the historic record to account for that.
To get a better idea of what happens to the ground during an earthquake, I drove here to Agua Dulce, about an hour from Los Angeles, to the Vasquez Rocks. Now, these sandstone layers that you see jutting up behind me are the direct result of seismic activity along the San Andreas Fault. And while these particular rocks have been lifted up over a span of roughly 25 million years or so, they really show how catastrophic the same type of lifting would be to California's streets and buildings. By using Professor Lozos' study, seismologists can now update their databases to show just how big of a role the San Jacinto Fault plays in Southern California. But rather than simplifying the prediction process, this study may have just complicated it, because it increases the probability that the next big one could hit a major metropolitan area. In Agua Dulce, Brigida, Santos, RT.